And welcome everyone. We're back finally. We had a few tech problems, but it, I hope it's going to be solved. Robert,
Hey, hey,
glad to have you back for another
glad
show.
to be back. This ought to
Uh,
be a live one.
yes, it's. I still think it's sad that we have to do shows like this, but it seems to be necessary.
A
So
100% a necessary evil.
yeah. So today we're gonna have two special guests. One is someone they everyone will know from YouTube, which is Amadeus Almighty, and the other one is your best friend Simon. So
Yep.
let's welcome both to the show. Hey guys, how are you doing?
Hello. Great. Yourself?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine.
Good.
Great. So Kelvin, we're having struggle problems with your audio. Are you back?
Mm, not quite.
No, we we still can't hear you. So
Uh, can you hear me?
Yes.
yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
Oh, okay. It's great to have you. So Robert, let me kick it over to you. Anything specific you wanna talk about? First, oh, let's have some introductions. So,
All
Kelvin,
right.
do a brief introduction for people who do not know who you are. Nope, no sound,
And
Kelvin.
nothing. Damn it.
Well, my name is Kelvin Morrison, and most people know, but most
You're still
We
cutting.
just lost him.
You're still cutting in and out,
know
Kelvin.
is just a ride with certain experiences in life, and I'm very opinionated, known for being very blunt and direct
Hmm.
in those respects.
I caught that part.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Sound is getting better.
I'm really
No,
difficulty on my end, guys. I'm sorry.
Can you move to another spot?
Okay. All right. Well, like I was saying, my name's Kelvin, and I'm Joe Amadeus Almighty. I'm here, and I'm just a guy with certain experiences, and I'm a very opinionated person, and I have a lot of conversations with religious people and political conversations online.
I caught that.
I'm just here to have this, important conversation and hopefully offer my perspective, and I guess hopefully educate somebody who may not know much about this topic.
okay. Well, sound still isn't that great, Kelvin. You keep cutting in and out a little bit, but we at least we got caught most of it, and I'm really glad to have you on our show. Uh, so looking forward to talking. Then we've got someone that probably apart from Robert, no one knows on at least not in our communities. Simon,
You're about to.
welcome to the show. Can you do a quick
Well, thank you.
introduction?
It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Yeah, Robert Christ is my best friend, and we've known each other for 24 years. And I think we both think there was an accident in 1973, and they just duplicated the DNA. And with
Pretty
minor exceptions, I'm the Danny DeVito character in this movie, and but essentially we seem to be about the same person if you can't see the resemblance.
Pretty much.
So he asked me to come and give you my opinions and stuff, which I have a plethora of, and I'm happy to share.
Just so everybody knows out there, so when I first met this cat, I was still very religious. And in a very I don't even want to use the word challenge, but he challenged me, and he never pulled me. He just kept dropping these questions, and I could never fucking answer them. And it's like, okay, clearly. And the last thing he asked me was, name the one thing that you can do with Christianity that you can't do without. And when I couldn't answer that, I was like, fuck it. Clearly, I must not be a believer. And for all of you who have followed my timeline, if you want to know why it is I pop gummies and smoke the occasional, it's his fault. It's 100%.
I'm 2 for 2.
It's his fault. Because I was popping Vicodin like they were fucking M&Ms when we met. And
Robert,
like, you got to do weed. You got to do weed. You got to do weed. It's better for you. You got to do weed. I was like, no, fuck you. Well, now I'm doing the whole weed thing. So you can blame him. It's his fault.
he's my one and only convert to atheism.
He gets a set of steak knives.
Yes.
Well, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
We didn't have any specific topics set up, Robert. So I'm leaving it to you to kick it off. What's on your mind?
What was on my mind was, because you and I have talked about it when I was on B's channel more than once, and some of my tweets, and when people are asking me, what can we do? Which I think is a very legit question, because you hear a lot of the complaints, which are legit as fuck, but we still need to focus on where do we go from here. And so when you've got a brotherhood, not even a friendship, that's lasted almost a quarter of a century, I think it's important for people to hear, not you guys have already heard what I've said. And so it's kind of like, and on my screen, Simon's kind of on it. I think it's important for people to hear from his mouth on how this thing works, because this is such a multi-layered conversation, and he knows where I work because that's where I met him. The bar for racism is so low that if you go to bed at night and you don't call someone a wetback, a gook, a nigger, a slant, everyone thinks around here that you're the second coming of Martin Luther King or Marcus Garvey, when it's so much more than that. And so, again, you guys have already heard me bitch and complain. So I just think it's super important for someone who doesn't look like me to give the other side. That's why I wanted my brother to show up, and so y'all can hear what he's got to say, because he has, in my opinion, one more thing. He's got a unique perspective because of his upbringing. And I think when we all start on the same plane, it's kind of easier to see the same horizon, because some of us just don't have the same vision. He knows exactly what it is I'm talking about. He has seen the stuff that I've seen. He's heard the stuff that I've heard. And so I don't even have to tell him anything. He just says, oh, I got it, before I even open up my mouth. Whereas some people, you have to actually convince them that this shit is fucked up. And so I'll shut up and I'll let Steve. And by the way, this is probably the only time you'll ever hear me say Simon. And it's probably the only time you'll ever hear him say Robert. I've been Chris for 25 years. He's been Seafood, which means teacher in martial arts. So he outranks me. So Seafood, the floor is yours, man.
Well, I think, thank you. That was more than generous. I don't think I outrank you, but regardless.
Not now. But when I met you, you were kicking my ass.
Yeah, now I'm just broken. Yeah, so I'm assuming the general topic here we're talking about is kind of quote unquote racism in the United States specifically, if I'm correct. My first thought on the topic is I don't think there is such a thing as racism, because we're all the same. There's no race. We're humans. I'm a dentist, so I have a lot of medical training, and I see the only difference is the concentration of melanin in your skin, in your epithelium. And so that's kind of how I look at it. Like, well, some people are blonde and some people are redheads, and of course we should drown them. But I mean, other than that,
he's up on the redheads.
You know, there's no difference between one human to another, at least biologically, physiologically, you know, and some fundamental human truths, like we all want to succeed, we all want to be a productive part of our society, our community, our et cetera. And as we grow older and hopefully develop ourselves a little bit on multiple levels, our groups get bigger and bigger. You know, the most egocentric thing on the planet is a baby, and we should move away from egocentrism as we age and work on ourselves, and probably get some therapy and do some reading and meditation or whatever it is that you're into. And as our groups get bigger, you know, we go from, you know, city, from state to the Broncos or the Cowboys to America and then hopefully we get a percentage of global citizens that look at things in a causal kind of global way. But what we have, I think, here is without question a systemic racism that's been going on for several hundred years. But I think, you know, as I think it was Wilkerson that wrote the book Caste. She was the first African-American woman to win a Pulitzer Prize. And she points out in her book that during the Jim Crow era, that what we really created was a caste system. And I think that's really what we're butting up against right now. It translates in experience as racism, but I think the core of the problem is that we created a caste system during the Jim Crow times, and I think our baser human kind of primal perspectives always want somebody beneath us. I came up 20 years of Aikido training along with many other systems, and the first reason why I was drawn to Aikido in the beginning is the founder, Morihei Ueshiba Sensei, didn't allow competition in the martial art. And I really appreciated that. And his perspective is once you create a competition, you create a winner and a loser, and you put somebody beneath you. And that is not a human thing to do. And that's kind of very much been a part of me and my experience for the last several decades. But I think in approaching this conversation with people, and I talk about it to patients. I don't care. If you don't like me, there's a dentist down the road and you can go see them. But the hardest, one of the more difficult things I think people to really acknowledge is is white privilege. You know, and it is such an amorphous, hidden, you know, kind of thing, and at the same time just blatantly overt. It's an enigma, because you know, as Robert mentioned, you know, I grew up in a very impoverished position, and you know, my formative years were in the inner city of Baltimore, and I was, you know, in a situation where I was in a minority being a white person. And even growing up before then, I don't remember having a lot of white friends. Most of my friends were, you know, black, and that's just what I was used to. But I will say that coming from the, you know, government housing and food stamps and a single mom and all that stuff, and now I'm a dentist living in Breckenridge, Colorado, there's only two reasons why that happened. One reason is my brain happens to work in a particular way, which I have no control over or no influence on. And secondly, I'm white. And, you know, and then thirdly, I guess I got really lucky in a couple situations. But I can't say that a good percentage of my quote unquote success, whatever metric you want to use, isn't related to the fact that my epithelium has a low concentration of melanin. And getting people to acknowledge that, I think it's important to take the perspective, like, I don't see that as detracting from anything that I've gone through or anything that I've done. I don't look at it as, well, I should, there's no punishment. This is just where we find ourselves. And this is where I find myself. And
but what you just said is, to me, about the only thing I agree with Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous is the first step, is admitting that, if I snort 27, bump 27 rails of coke before 6 a.m., I may have a fucking problem. That's the hard part. And getting people to, I can't tell how many Twitter conversations I've had to just cut because we don't have enough in common to take it to the next step, to where it's like, if you're not willing to admit that maybe systemic racism is a thing, it doesn't mean you as a white person is a horrible piece of shit, but just admitting that there's a reality, that white privilege is an actual thing that exists, doesn't mean that necessarily Joe Blow across the street, who just so happens to be white, is a sack of shit. It's just you're admitting that there's something there. And what you said, to me, is what puts you 5 million steps up front of everybody else, because we still have, fuck, you worked in the exact same place I did, man. We have way too many people stuck right here who will still sit here and say shit like, well, name one law that, protects me as a white person that doesn't protect you as a black person. And I can't say her name, but I told you the first person to tell me that. And it's like, that's why we're not going to ever get anywhere, because to me, there aren't enough people.
Well, I would say that the issue that I would say, at least in my humble opinion, but I'm not humble, everybody knows that, that it's not an issue. It's very easy if you were to come to me and say, oh, white privilege, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, well, I could come up with a million reasons why you're wrong.
Right.
But those aren't the issues. That isn't the problem. If you were to ask me, I would say that this is purely an ego problem.
I won't argue.
It really doesn't have to do with the hue of my skin and the hue of your skin. It's that, from my observation of people, and I see a lot of patients over the years, and I've gotten to know a lot of people, is that when we, especially, at least as Americans, when we achieve some degree of what I would call commercial success, not necessarily being a decent human being, which is real success, but having, some financial weight behind you, having some security, whatever you want to call it, what we tend to do is we write a book, and you write a book about how you became successful. And if people only did the things that you did and behaved the way that you behaved, and ate the oatmeal every morning and ran the 2 miles and didn't eat meat or whatever it was that you happened to arbitrarily do in your life, if everyone would just do this, then you too can be successful, which isn't very different from any spiritual text. Some random person may or may not have achieved some higher sense of consciousness through some accidental experience. Like my teacher always says, he's like, you get a monk who stubs his toe in the woods and becomes enlightened, then you get a sect of monks who are all out in the woods trying to stub their toe. And it's like, what? But all the conditions that came together in that one moment for that person, nobody can duplicate.
Right.
And so the illusion that I think is at least a significant part of this conversation about white privilege is that my success is related to the choices I make and the things that I do, which is absolute and total horseshit. And even when you watched President Obama being interviewed by David Letterman on David Letterman's Netflix show, Letterman asked him, like, what was it that got you to where you are to, be whatever? And,
I remember.
And President Obama goes, luck, dude, like I was at the right place at the right time. I knew the right people. I just got lucky. And And I stood up in my house and applauded, because that needs to be discussed more than anything.
Right.
And if we can have that conversation and take our egos out of our quote unquote success, or even lack of success, from a worldly commercial perspective, then we can say, okay, well, I got here by luck. What are the other variables that have fucking nothing to do with me that got me here? But if you can't get past that, this is my doing, I did this, then you're never going to have a conversation that's real, where somebody's going to go, yeah, there's a lot of white privilege that got me to this.
And that person whose name I can't. Can Kelvin hear us? Is he online?
Kelvin's here.
All right, because he needs to jump in on this, because there's a name. Simon knows everything. That conversation with that person with the very successful family, that person, I remember we had that conversation, and this person just would not let go of, and I'm with you with the whole luck thing and the things that you can't control. I just so happened to be a large athletic Negro. I could not put my hat on that. It just fucking happened because my dad nutted inside of my mom. Next thing you know, I'm running down on a fucking NFL kickoff. Took some hard work, but there was some luck involved in that shit. But with the whole, the luck with the white privilege, and when this person asked, it was, name one advantage I have as a white person that you don't have as a black person.
You're a white person. That's your
and I remember telling you, but I couldn't tell this person that, and I can't say it while we're on air. But it was like, well, the one advantage was you got to start the business that your family is now rich as a result of. And the most important thing is two things. When your great grandfather went to that bank to get the business loan, no one looked like me when they went in to go get the business loan. No one had a vagina. No one was Mexican. No one was Asian. It was just a line of Christian, rich white dudes. So kind of the point is, it's luck, but with the white privilege thing is that skin color will never work against you. Whereas you get me and Kelvin in a line to go get a business loan, especially when this person started their business, they'd be like, ooh, niggers, we don't think so. Yeah. So the white privilege thing, luck, fuck yeah. Right place, right time. But your skin color will never work against you.
Well, up until relatively recently, you couldn't have even walked into that bank. And if you could have, you would have had to use a different door. How is there a conversation about this? The most absurd, Americans like to tell ourselves lies about our history and create this context of American exceptionalism, which is just ridiculous. And the great John Oliver had a commentary about it recently on his show, and he said, America, you need to come to terms with your past and the things that you've done in the past. And he goes, trust me, I'm British. We've really done some stupid, horrible thing. Like, if we can do it, you guys can do it. You guys have 500 years. We have several thousand years, and several continents to, atone for, but this absolute bullshit conversation of, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. My great-great-granddaddy was an immigrant from some country and came and built it. Well, but there was no other competition. I mean, it was a free-for-all. Firstly, This was also, mind you, post-genocide of an entire civilization and culture of natives who were already here. Oops, let's give them guys. But once we wiped them out mostly, then it was woohoo, and all these people from Europe came over, and they've all gone through their periods of prejudice, the Irish and Italians and et cetera, but there was no competition for them to continue moving forward. There was no Hispanic representation. There was no black representation. There was certainly no women participating in our economy. And so it's you'd have to be kind of fucked up to not succeed in that situation. It's like somebody hands you a football and then the rest of the team just sits down and they're like, see if you can make a touchdown now, Robert, and it's like when everybody's sitting there rolling a joint, like that's pretty much the equivalent. So the idea that this country was built on all these ideas that we continue to promote is obscene and offensive to the rest of the population. And it goes back to, I think, that creation of the caste system, clearly with slavery, and even more ingrained litigiously through the Jim Crow era, that it just we've never fixed it. We've never gone back. I mean, we have to remember that the first police force that was formed in the United States was to catch runaway slaves. Yeah. And it's like, so we're surprised now that they're still.
But again, that's what you and I have talked about a million times, in that there aren't enough people willing to admit, like, not just a person who were from our job, but I mean, how many people are willing to say? I mean, look at fuckface Trump, who sat there and took a shit on the 1619 project and initiated the 1776 project, saying that pretty much teaching actual history, that this country was founded sitting on some bullshit. He called that indoctrination, and that he just wants to teach, hey, Martin Luther King came and now everything's great, it's sexy and vibrant. What are you niggers complaining about, right? It's what they say about Colin Kaepernick, right? You made $19 million. What do you have to complain about? And so my thing is always there. I don't think there's enough people like you. I've told you and I had this conversation when the whole George Floyd thing happened. And I've told people at work, because I divorced myself from my phone, and until y'all hooked me up, I was disconnected because I didn't want to hear, because it was with George Floyd. It was, Robert, we see you. Robert, you're a good person. Robert, Black Lives Matter. And I was like, 6 months ago when I told you this, you literally laughed at me. You told me I had nothing to complain about. I was like, do you know who I didn't hear from? I didn't hear from Simon, Seth, Pat, Dr. Dre, Todd. I didn't hear from any of them. And you know why their silence speaks more than the bullshit you're saying now? Because 23 years ago when I met this man, he was already saying that. It's like the definition of the word discipline. Discipline is what you do when nobody's looking. How easy is it to lift all the weights and run all the laps when the coaches are staring at you? But when no one's looking, are you still working as hard? It's easy to blow up a black person's phone now and say, oh, George Floyd's terror. Oh, Black Lives. But you were the one laughing 6 years ago when we were telling you this shit is fucked up. So I'm like, Simon's silence said more than your 500 text messages. And my point is, I just don't think there's enough people willing to step up and say, this shit's fucked up.
Well, I would ask, like, the tragedy of the murder of George Floyd, how is that the one when it's happened how many times in the
exactly
past?
What I told him. I told people. I said it on Twitter, and when I finally went back to work, it was like George Floyd is a battle cry. This has been going on forever. You're just now seeing it because we have fucking social media.
Yeah, when I was younger in high school in Baltimore, the cops were good for getting your ass kicked or buying drugs from them, and that was, and when the riots happened several years ago, patients were like, "Oh, have you seen what's happening in Baltimore?" I'm like, "Yeah, it looks exactly like it did when I lived there in the in the 80s and the disease or the cancer of American exceptionalism being the foundation of our history lessons is without question the reopening of the wound over and over again, generation upon generation, because all the people in Senate, in the Congress, in the House of Representatives, very few of them are younger than us. if any, that I can think of. A lot of them are in their 70s, and so consider, as John Oliver pointed out a couple of weeks back, consider the textbooks, the history books that they grew up on.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You can't look at them and be like, oh my gosh. It's like, but this is what they've been taught their entire life, that slavery was just kind of a jamboree, and occasionally they did chores, and like, I remember reading that shit when I was in grade school, and my mom had us in Christian school, so it was 10 times worse, because they don't like to acknowledge anything that's real.
They're not a fan of facts.
Yeah, no, those pesky facts. And, it's like, if you took a poll, and I think that most Americans these days would be very conscious of, or at least vaguely familiar with, the great Martin Luther King speech, "I Have a Dream." That's one of those iconic moments in American history.
Right.
But we don't talk about all of his other speeches after that, which the vast majority of were actually, in my opinion, echoing the things that the great brother Malcolm X was saying about economic stability, reparations. We've got to create an economic even playing field, because the bottom line is, you got money, you got a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And from Jim Crow all the way to redlining with the FHA, when FDR started, I think it was FDR, started the FHA, and that was the first time we were doing 30-year loans, and they redlined black neighborhoods so that their property values wouldn't go up and they couldn't qualify for a mortgage. And that went on for 30-ish years. Yeah. And then continuing on to the great migration into, that promoted the migration into quote unquote white suburbia, which is clearly what Shitface McGee, our president, is talking about, protecting the suburbs. That's just code for revisiting, the segregation that was, during the 50s, and like this, the high idea of like, what if a black person moves into our neighborhood? What if a black person moves in? Like, I remember, my first mother-in-law, and I won't use their names. I should totally, but I remember she called the house once, and I was 22, 23, and she was hysterical because a black family had moved 2 doors down from her in her neighborhood, and she thought she had lost her entire retirement and the value, and I was like, are we still doing this? And that was, I was just shocked, and that was in Baltimore. It's like one of the most racist cities in the country, in my experience.
Actually, but go ahead.
There certainly needs to be a conversation about white privilege, but I think we need to, step it back and make it a more personal conversation and get to the point where people can admit that what they have and where they are is not related to their greatness and their wonder. It's related to so many variables, and this is one variable.
So here's the bottom line. So for the 2 people that are watching and the 6 that may watch after, Sifu, you and I have had this conversation before, and I've often said there's a difference between hard work and working hard. Mm-hmm. Like, I have no doubt that some of those cats get to the office at 7 o'clock in the morning, don't leave till 7 o'clock at night. Those are long hours. But hard work is something different. You worked hard, right? You went from 0 to where you are now. But when someone hands you the keys to a multi-million-dollar business and said, hey, just don't fuck it up, you're just working long hours. So there's a difference. And we keep going back
with that, because I went to dental school, I got a master's degree. Yeah. I wouldn't qualify that as working hard. There's a lot of studying, but it's certainly voluntary. Okay, it's not imposed on you.
No, but again, we can't use names, but we're all talking about the same person. there was a female dentist that worked out at our gym.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She put in long hours, but this person's mother was a dentist. She already had a foundation. Right. And so it was like getting into XYZ school was different than your path.
Oh, yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? There were no hookups. There was no nothing. If I'm not mistaken, they saw your application the first time and gave you the fucking finger.
Right.
They were jerking off waiting for her application.
Yeah. And that was like really the first time that I could point to a socioeconomic prejudice was when I applied to dental school, because when I applied to dental school the first time, I had a 4.0 GPA. I scored in the 93rd percentile on the entrance exam, and they did give me the finger. And when I called them to say, well, how can I improve my, application next time? They said, well, you don't have a lot of volunteer work. And at the time, I was in my 30s. I had a mortgage. I had a business I was running as an acupuncturist. I did a lot of charity work, but I wasn't in a fraternity.
Right.
And that's all just money and again, supporting that concept of white privilege. It's just that these kids go to school, their parents can afford a fraternity, they get a lot of bullshit or sometimes real volunteer work, but they don't have to work. Never was a moment in school that I didn't have to work in addition, except for dental school, which you can't.
Do you remember Cornel West did an experiment? And he played the role. He used his suburban voice and his urban voice.
Mm-hmm.
His suburban voice had the exact same credit score, assets, all superb. His urban voice had the exact same superb resume, except one was John, the other one was Tyrone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a housing discrimination experiment.
Mm-hmm.
The guy with the white resume, it's like, how can we help you? I mean, you know what? Fuck it. We'll pay your mortgage for you.
Mm-hmm.
Tyrone, they told him, go kick rocks with a 900 credit score, assets, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so this person who was in dental school before you, she was the John.
Mm-hmm.
It never, her skin tone and the volunteer hours, the sorority, her mom's last name, the donations, none of that ever works against her. And I had to write it down so I didn't forget when you talked about like the older people in Senate. I remember D.L. Hughley, who went from comedian to one of the greatest social commentary people of our time. If you anyone who's never listened to DL, he's got a section of his radio show called A Note from the GED section, because the man never graduated high school. All he has is a GED. And I remember him talking about people like Mitch McConnell when the topic of reparations came up. And of course, Mitch said, fuck it, and gave the same old bullshit of, I've never owned a slave, you've never been one, get over it. And DL just ripped the whole narrative a new asshole. Where it's like,
it's not true.
Right. And it's like, well, especially if you're like Mitch McConnell's age, chances are you were taught to read by a black person.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Especially in Kentucky.
Right, exactly. And he's even mentioned University of Kentucky, where Mitch McConnell went. No one who looked like me went to the U of K back in those days. Everything that you had, you stood on the shoulders of black people. You lined up at 8 meters
on their necks.
Yeah, exactly. Like you stood at the 80 meter marker. They said, on your mark, set, go. You got to the finish line while everyone who wiped your ass started at the 0 mark. And then you're turning around saying, well, why can't you get where I got?
Well, go ahead. Finish.
No, I'm just saying. And I don't hate to say it. Fuck it. There's going to have to be a certain, probably 2 generations that have to die off
At least.
Because I'm almost at this point convinced with all the shit that I've seen, there's just certain people that are not going to change their mind. And they just have to not be here. And it's that family who you know I'm talking about and their kids and possibly even their grandkids, because they've already taught everybody it's all equal. Negroes have nothing to complain about. If you just work hard, you can have a multi-million-dollar business yourself. But what they don't tell their fucking kids is, oh, by the way, when great-great-granddad went to go to get the business loan, all the people who look like Chris, they were working in the fucking fields. Mm-hmm. They weren't even full human beings. On a great day, they were 3/5. And so I will always go back and say, you, Seth, there's not enough people in this population who are willing to say we weren't founded on equal ground. You know what I mean? And like I said, if I look at a 7th grade football player who's bench pressing 75 pounds, who runs a 5.4 in the 40, I'm like, what's wrong with you piece of shit? You mean you can't go take on a base block from a 280-pound all-pro tight end like I did? What kind of piece of shit are you? What kind of asshole would I be if I looked at someone who didn't have the same foundation as I did? And so when you say what you say, and that's why I think you being on this show is so damn important, because again, I can say it all day long, and again, I'm just another complaining ass Negro. It's
not
when
to me.
someone yeah, exactly. That's but it's just like there's not enough people, in my opinion, who are willing to say white privilege is real. Well, maybe this country was built on uneven ground because the people who are here, they built this fucking place. These people, like Mitch McConnell, like you said, stood on the necks of people who look like my dad and my grandfather, and they're the ones saying, well, I worked hard, why can't you?
Well, several things. Number one, I think, although this will never happen, we need to come up with a different litmus for success as a human being. Because when we anchor it in economic power, we're really not creating an environment where any of these problems we have, whether it's gender-based or skin tone-based or, nationality-based or whatever, prejudices out there, we haven't created a fertile soil to start addressing these issues. But the idea, there was a period of time where racism was totally cool, and just watch Mad Men if you doubt that. And at some point, during the 60s and 70s, obviously it kind of changed a little bit. And you can go and read and watch, people who still are in, the Republican Party talking about how can we mask this racism and basically create rules that don't really seem racist, and we can disguise them, but the outcome is clearly racist. Yeah. And Texas is a wonderful example of that because of lack of state income tax. They do property taxes, and property taxes are inherently racist because the white rich neighborhoods get the Westlake high schools, which have bigger football stadiums and a lot of colleges, and a theater and a performing arts center, which rivals anything on Broadway, and I've been to both, where poorer neighborhoods before East Austin was gentrified, had worse schools and no textbooks because it was supported by the property values, which had been systemically repressed and oppressed for decades upon decades. And so there's all these things that we've done, and I think, for example, we were one of the few countries that doesn't provide free public education for college, because we know that when you go through college, you're going to be more liberal, more inclusive, less racist. We don't have universal health care for people, because that puts people on a fundamental equal basis. Because if you're poor in this country, if you're working poor, which, let's be honest, it's a lot of minority people that are in that place. There's a lot of poor white folks too. If, I just overheard some of my staff talking about, like, if I didn't have insurance, because up here we're very active, and, one of my patients was like, yeah, my husband fell and broke his hip and tore his knee out on his bike, and if we didn't have insurance, we would have lost our house over that. That kind of, it creates a fear conversation, and that fear conversation can be used to justify any action, regardless of its ethics and its morals. That's where we are.
We got a question from the side chat from Aunt Jer. I put it up on screen, but it's probably too small for you to read.
I can't see it. What did it say?
Yeah, Aunt Jer asks, how do you counter the people who look at the evidence for everything you're saying and call it propaganda? Because
that's just a religious response. I mean,
I was going to say those people, and we talked about this yesterday, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
To me, those are the exact same people who get their feelings hurt when they hear the word racism, and they just want to retreat back into their turtle shell. To those people, I'm not going to lie, fuck you, because I'm too old. Sifu's too old. I'm at this point, I'm just trying to gather as many people as I possibly can who are going to go forward. And it's kind of like, we don't ask world-renowned, board-certified gynecologists and fertility specialists to debate people who think that storks still bring babies.
Nope.
If you still think that in this day and age, we can't help you. You go over there in the fucking Stone Ages. There's just a certain portion of the population that I have emotionally written off. So to answer the question, then Sifu can jump in. If after everything this man just fucking said, which is nothing but fucking facts, if you heard Symon Stanley say what he just said and you are going like, I don't believe it, my response is fuck you. You're no different than a person who thinks the earth is flat and storks bring babies. So it's a harsh answer. I don't have time to recruit anymore. I don't want to become the next fucking hashtag. I want the generation of black kids after me to have an easier life than I did. And if all you're going to do is standing my way, I'm just going to sidestep you and I'm going to leave you on the vine to die. That's my answer. Sifu?
Well, it's very, we've created this discourse model, and maybe I'm having a bye-bye birdie moment, but it seems to be relatively recent where, if someone is taking a position and arguing a point, and I feel that I am right now, and I'm doing my best to use factual data, and nobody's perfect except our dog, so I'm sure I've made some errors, but we've created the possibility where in these kind of conversations you can just saying this propaganda is dismissive. That's not a conversation. That's
True.
Not engaging. And nowadays you can destroy an entire well thought out, perspective, argument, debate by going, oh, that's propaganda. That's just liberalism. That's just fake news.
Right.
Well, but that's not really what we're talking about. You're just being dismissive, because you can be and you have nothing to say. If you think it's propaganda, then great, go for it.
Well,
I would do a little bit more reading.
Here's the thing. Before we went live, I had a conversation with a guy, Robert knows him, Atheist.
Yeah.
One of the first people that I became friends with on social media, and we were talking about the show and about the problems. He's in Texas as well. He's close to Dallas. What I'm thinking is those people who will give you that answer, it's all propaganda, those people probably do not know anyone of color and do not socialize with people like that. And what to Atheist about is I've never had that problem where I needed to make distinguish people by their skin color. I've never had that. I've always gotten along better with people who weren't born in the country that I was born in, and those people are also missing out. And the reason that I mentioned this is because I mentioned Robert in this. I met Robert on a channel, she who shall not be named.
Shall not be named. Yeah.
And so we had a conversation, and within, I think, about 10 minutes, I could start a question, and Robert could finish it, and vice versa. And so we hit it off, and immediately after that, I asked him, "Hey, yeah, I need you on my show. You're a great guy. We work well together, and this is how that works." And then you get to know someone, and I didn't know anyone of color in the U.S. I'm from Holland, so situation here is a little bit different than it is
where freedom comes from.
Yeah, well, we've got our idiots as well.
Yeah.
Trust me. But in my life, I've met so many different people. We were close friends with people who came over from Morocco. Robert, I wouldn't have missed it for the world meeting him on that channel. It's still one of the best days for me on social media. And those people are missing out, and I don't know what your take is on that, Simon, because
well,
once you
I'm
have,
going to try to go ahead.
yeah, once you have a close
Hmm.
friend who's going through all of this, then you'll be with him and be a witness to it. And
yeah, I think, I'm lucky. I have a lot of close friends that I hold dear, and Robert's one of them, and he's certainly not my only black friend.
I have lots of white friends.
Yeah, and this conversation actually, I think, started when I texted Robert an article that I read on Huffington Post about white people not being good with being friends with people of color, specifically black people, and I read the article, and granted, I have my perspective on it, and I looked at it through the lens of my relationship with Robert for 24 years, and the things that all they were talking about was the context of how do white people relate and how do black people communicate these things, and Robert and I became friends because I started working where he worked as the acupuncturist, and I was a fighter. And somebody's like, "Oh, you need to talk to Robert. He's into martial arts too." And I walked up to him and I was like, "Hey, I hear you're into martial arts." And he goes, "Hey, so I am." And I go, "Hey, let's go to lunch." And then 3 hours later, we were best friends. And in no time during our friendship did our ethnicity. That's not even on page 50 of the things that that built and was the continued foundation and growing and evolution of our friendship. Asses are probably higher on that list.
I was thinking about the Chipolina's Day. Remember that?
Our mutual ocean of rage that we carry around, and our general malfeasance of our personalities that makes us want to possibly write manifestos one day. These things have always been more important in our friendship than anything else, and sharing our as far as our experience culturally. There's not a lot of difference between how we were brought up and how we were raised. I don't and so again, if we come to the table with a list of differences, that's what you're going to leave with. If you come to the table and say, "This is just another fucking piece of shit person just like me that is a total idiot, that is a meat puppet, let's see if we can't enrich each other's experiences on this shitty piece of dust in the middle of nowhere universe."
But my thing was,
I got a little dark there. Excuse me.
I was when you were talking about, but when Peter, you were talking about, not knowing people of color. I remember having this conversation with my mom after I was.
I love that woman.
That's his mom too. Thoroughly insulted, and I can't say the person's name, but if I said the initials, he would know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, it made me cry. I had to go to the break room, and I cried over the conversation we had, and that's when it hit me. It's not that they don't have people of color in their lives. It's just the people of color in their lives they own. And when you're working as a 30, 40, 50-year-old person for $11 an hour, you're happy to get those $11 an hour. And these are the exact same people who sit here and talk about this person like they're a piece of property, like it was a teddy bear passed down through the generation, and say, well, she's just like family. Well, here's the thing. When that Mexican lady who you bumped from $11 an hour to $15 an hour, and she's got grandkids, well, if she's happy, why aren't the other Mexicans happy?
Right.
If the black person that I'm paying $15 to cut my yard is happy, Robert, why aren't you happy? And so that's why I said in the very beginning, our foundations are so fucking different. And so when you go and you talk to those minorities, and they sat there and they sit there like, oh, things are great. Thank you for my check for $200. They're happy than a motherfucker. Everyone else who's not employed by them is like, you know what? This shit is fucked up. They're like, well, why can't you be like them?
Well, anybody who employs somebody and thinks that what they say to their employer is honest is a moron.
And you know the people that I work around, so you know how moronic they can be.
And one of the to kind of maybe shift gears a little bit here, I think in the context of the conversation about white privilege and addressing and having a conversation of that with that issue, one of the bigger obstacles, and you're hearing it, is that there's going to be a period of time, ladies and gentlemen, where as white males, you're going to feel like you're not equal anymore.
Oh, just finish my sentence. You already know what I'm going to
There's going to be a period of time of equilibration where you're going to feel like, you're no longer the top of the mountain. So you're going to have to be okay. Equality is going to feel like shit to you. Just going to put that out there.
Just so everybody knows, this is a relationship that was going on for almost a quarter of a century. I think he says it vice versa. We have often said equality is a thing that everyone loves to talk about, but not enough people want to participate in. I've been doing the same job for over 2 decades. I've been doing the same job as long as I've known this fucker right here. The kids that both he and I saw when they were 1 were going to college just 2 or 3 years ago. The families of those kids 15 years ago could not stop talking about equality, Martin Luther King, everyone's equal. Those same people were legacy admissions. And when their kids didn't get into a certain school that 4 generations before got in, that's when I started to hear things like, well, my kid didn't get into XYZ school because some Mexican took their spot.
Or
dumbasses.
Right.
One thing I know about college applications, even though I never filled one out, my game tape was my application. If you fill out an application to go to Texas A&M, dear John, thank you for your application to Texas A&M. Unfortunately, after careful consideration, we have rejected your application. What they don't tell you is a nigger took your spot, John. Sorry. And so, again, equality is that thing that everyone loves to talk about. And like you said, Sifu, you're absolutely right. There's going to be some white people that aren't going to get a spot at the big table that they're accustomed to getting. And I was the exact same way when it came to Title IX and athletics. Because in the 80s and the 90s, I was that guy's like, well, fuck it. Just get some bigger crowds. And then I had someone slap me across the face metaphorically and say, you have no idea what Title IX is about, do you? Yeah. And then when she educated me, I was like, oh, I'm a piece of shit. You're absolutely right. Equality means there may be one less lacrosse team for men and 5 extra for women. And even if that's the case, it's still a fucking unbalanced scale. Letting 5 blacks, 6 Mexicans, and 25 Asians into the University of Texas, great. But look at still the white enrollment, right? So when your white is 47% and everyone else is fighting for everything else, you're going to complain because you're like, hey, yeah, wow, we went from, let's say, 63% down to 47%. We dropped. Be like, you understand it's not white and then like black. It's white and fucking 27 other varieties of humanity. You're still in the fucking majority. So like you said, equality, everyone loves to talk about it. Not enough people want to participate in it.
Well, everything costs. And
everything costs.
The fact that this conversation and many others I feel across our nation are happening, talking about equality, just like, anybody who says don't bring politics into sports when they're, Sir Colin Kaepernick is clearly, as he's mentioned, protesting the systemic racism. It's not a political issue, but the fact that you think it's a political issue indicates that it's a problem. Anybody who's talking about equality inherently is talking about the fact that there's inequality. And anytime you're trying to address that, somebody's going to take a hit. And personally, I can say, I got into it with a patient several weeks ago, and he's certainly a product of white privilege, and he's got a lot of money. Great guy, nothing that he's done inherently that's caused this. It's just the life he's led. And we were talking about, some of these issues, and he came out and he's like, well, I'm totally opposed to these ideas of reparations, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm actually 100% for them. I would say that if it requires 90% tax on my income, I will learn to live on 10%. Not because of any, altruistic, concept of, sacrificing myself, but we find ourselves in this moment in history. And just like the World War II generation found themselves in, they weren't like, I don't want to go to Europe. They went and they did what they needed to do. We find ourselves in this part of history. They made their sacrifices. Generations upon generations and countries all over the world have made sacrifices at varying points in time, for varying reasons. This is our time. And this is our time to make the sacrifice. And my perspective is, even, life is suffering. I don't expect it to be anything other than that. And so if there's an economic suffering that I have to go through to provide future generations from not having to fucking talk about this, then that's my obligation as a human being, as a citizen of this country, as a citizen of this world, to do whatever it takes to create an economic viable future, so that concepts that we're having to just talk about right now, as my dogs are doing the pee-pee dance at home, that we don't have that, and I don't have kids, but I have a nephew, and I want him to grow up and not have to deal with this. And he's, part Mexican, so he's going to have to deal with this to some degree.
Right.
What can we do today? And if I have to take it in the ass, so be it.
Can I segue off of that, because I've been waiting for a couple of clues, and now I've got we just had you saying, Simon, everything comes at a cost, and I'm making a sacrifice, and what can we do? Robert already knows. I showed him. people have often asked us, why don't you have a Patreon? Why don't you have a PayPal account? We want to throw some money at your channel. And I always said, I'm doing this not because I want to make money. That's not why I started this channel. This isn't about me making money. Finally, we're going to sacrifice that idea. We're going to make money. At least we're hoping to make money.
For a great cause, though.
For a great cause. So
if you don't have a margin, you don't have a mission.
Yeah. Well,
Bam.
so I wanna show a quick commercial, and then we'll be back. So have a look, guys.
Let's take a look.
That's a T-shirt that I designed especially for doing our little bit to the Black Lives Matter movement. The T-shirt is on sale. I'll be putting the links in the description later on, and I will also make sure that I will tweet them out. There are on someone who graciously offered to help us, Scientist Mel, who's already having merchandise where she donates the proceeds to Black Lives Matter. And as you can see at this moment, it is available on the website. There's currently just 2 products. So there's, let me pull this up. There's the T-shirt, which is available in a few different colors. There's blue, there's a gray version, and there's a light gray version. And there's also a nice mug with the exact same logo. As you can see, prices $13 and $15. That shouldn't be a big problem to handle. And I think we're making about $3 per product, and that will go to the Black Lives Matter movement. And so as of now, our channel will have merchandise. I will be creating a few more things that we can put up on the store. The problem was we wanted to do this while we're live, and if Mel creates a product, it automatically tweets on her timeline. So we had to wait until we were live, and she waited until we were live to create the products and put up the links. And she can only create 2 products a day. So more will be added over the coming weeks. We're going to have caps. We're going to have stickers, I think. And I'll also be looking into making a few more designs. But yeah, that's the first. We're actually going to try and make money for a good cause.
I wanted to, before my brain turns off, because Sifu hit on something that we talked about. Shit. Oh, man. I think we were still in Timberline when you gave me the Enneagram. I read halfway through that book, scared the shit out of me, and then I threw it across the room. Mm-hmm. And then I picked it up, and then I finished it. We are 8s, right? I think we're 8.
According to that model. That's not what the Enneagram's for, but
okay,
whatever.
Well,
yeah.
And I remember it was way after that, a little bit after that, I had made a comment. And it was something along the lines of, it was basically, no one ever learns anything during times of comfort. Mm-mm. You have to be tested in order to learn important messages. And I remember you telling me that is such an 8 kind of comment. You got to get your metal tested. No sword ever gets sharpened unless it's put through the fucking fire. And when you sit here and you talk about, the stuff that you've said, just in terms of, equality, people have to be uncomfortable. And you're like, if they tax your income at 90%, and then I think about some of the people that you and I both know from the gym, they wouldn't say that. There's no fucking way. They're not giving up their 5-story houses, their house in the south of France, their new Tesla every 3 months. And Yeah, and it's like I think about, because I had a long talk with my mom when I've told her, look, I've kind of followed Dad's footsteps. For those of you who don't know, my dad was shot in the Civil Rights March. People used to hawk loogies and spit on my mom's face during sit-ins. And I told him, like, look, I've got online. I've talked shit at work. I talk shit in Austin. I've done as many marches as a man with one leg could possibly do. Sifu, I'm still getting the implant. They put me on those fucking muscle relaxers, and I hate them. But my point is, and my mom got scared. She started crying. I just remember I remember telling her, I would not be where I am if you and Dad did not sacrifice and were uncomfortable. And I'm going to try not to cry. And I think about Mama and Papa and Big Mama and the shit that I have heard that my family's gone through. To say uncomfortable is getting a hand job at a rub and tug. Uncomfortable does not do it justice. And so it's like, if you're not willing to be, you and I don't have kids, but you're willing to sacrifice for your nephew. I've got a Twitter niece.
Well,
and I feel all the time, fucking, why do I keep fighting?
That's what else is he going to do?
Go through this shit that you and I have gone through. So her generation doesn't have to have these fucking conversations. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Have I lost some friends? Yeah. Have I lost some customers? 4 of them. I told them, get the fuck out because I can't hear your fucking mouth anymore. If you're not willing to be uncomfortable, then you aren't part of the change. And if you're not part of the change, for anyone who's listening, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't use you. And I don't want you. If you're not willing to get dirty,
excuse me,
fuck you. Right? We've got to the point to where, I mean, allow me to be a historian, philosopher, Anakin Skywalker. If you are not with me, then you are my enemy. It's just that fucking simple. When I go and say, Colin Kaepernick saying, taking 2 minutes out of a 3-hour football game to say, you see that black person over there? Don't shoot him. And if that message bothers you so much that you can't watch football anymore, fuck you and your family, because I can't use you. Because I would take that 2-minute message and take that burden on my back. You'll take it on your back so the generation after us doesn't have to deal with this shit. If you can't be uncomfortable, I can't use you. And honestly, fuck you.
I would, I totally get that. And knowing what I know about you, I would take that same perspective.
I know you would.
I would add that I think really what you're talking about is courage.
Yes.
Because
being uncomfortable.
Right. It's not being uncomfortable. In fact, I think there's many studies that you can read out there about, human development, cognitive psychology, all those stuff that talk about, the parts of our lives that we look back on, that we celebrate, the parts of our lives that we feel most alive and most engaged are almost systemically the most challenging parts of our lives, the most difficult parts of our lives. You don't look back and think about, the easy Sunday afternoon where you had nothing to do and celebrate that. You celebrate the time that you played in Boulder and you couldn't breathe. You celebrate the injuries that you played through. I can't remember the fights that I've had where it was a rout, where it was easy to win. I remember the fights that I thought
where we kicked the shit out of each other.
I might die here, and let me see if I can turn this around. Like those are the times that we, as human beings, that's our fuel. And so, but it takes an enormous amount of courage to take that step. And I wouldn't say that it's a step towards uncomfortable. I would say it's a step towards the unknown. because we don't know what equality looks like. We don't know what, harmonic relations look like unless you watch Star Trek. We don't know what it's going to look like. And so I totally get,
But don't we?
When people,
I say, don't
I
we know
get,
just a little bit, like, when fuck what people's personal feelings are like Caitlyn Jenner, right? Remember when she came out as transgender? She made the switch. She got the boobs. The hair grew out. She did the Vanity Fair cover, and people were like, "That's not her." And they started to put the pictures, and maybe we're talking about the same thing, where they were like, a Navy SEAL, and he's got, his buddy, and he's running towards a helicopter, and like, that's brave. And it's like, actually, what's brave is doing the one thing that everyone is going to hate you for, and doing it anyway. That's courage to me.
I would say that brave is doing the one thing you think everybody's going to hate you for. The one thing that you perceive is the hardest thing.
Right.
But
like
my response, honestly, when you started talking about Caitlyn Jenner, my brain went, I don't fucking care. Like, I don't.
But Caitlyn Jenner just as a trans person in general.
I know it's a name. I know people talk about it. I know there was a transition, and I really don't care.
And it doesn't keep me up night either. But think about the people that we both know from 12th and Lamar. Think about the people who would look at certain situations. Like I've talked to more than one person. You've talked to more than one person who would say, I voted for Bush or I voted for Trump simply because it saves me money. It makes me more money. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say you're one of those people who's worth $5 million. And you say, you know what? I'm voting for Biden, for Barack Obama, Clinton. Pick the Democrat that everyone seems to hate. Even though you're worth, matter of fact, I remember this from someone that you've treated. They're called limousine liberals. Mm-hmm. Rich people who vote Democrat. Right. Those people get the shit kicked out of them behind everyone else's back because they're going against the grain. You should be voting for Trump. He's going to make you more money. Well, he's a misogynistic, rape-hungry bastard. Yeah, but he's going to make you more money. Right. Courage to me is saying, I'm standing up for the one thing I know the circle is going to talk. I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly it. But my point was in that context, without question, my point was these issues of social harmony among the different hues of skin. It all exists in our minds, like that's the courage that we have to go. Maybe I'm wrong, which I think is no longer an English phrase. Like no one can say that anymore. Like
it's the hardest.
We've decided that that's gauche and nobody has that.
Right. It's
maybe
the hardest
I'm wrong.
Phrase on the planet to say. Maybe I was wrong.
I think the great Buckminster Fuller once said, "I will never die for any of my beliefs because what if I were wrong?" It's
absolutely.
like, yeah, no.
Absolutely.
You guys can't see it. I put a comment up. Inquisitive Quandary said equality, in my opinion, starts with realizing standard fairness isn't fair at all. Supporting the strengths and supplementing the weaknesses of the individual for all is equality.
I dig it.
That's a reasonable definition.
Yeah, I'm not complaining at all.
And I would maybe change it a little because I don't necessarily think there are weaknesses. I think what's the positive thing for the bird is the negative thing for the worm. So what might be a weakness in one context could be a tremendous strength in another. But it's all about the context and how we allow a person to express their genuineness, which is an amalgamation of their individual experience. That's what makes us different. And it's kind of like we have an infinite library of knowledge of an experience that we could put to good use, or we could roast marshmallows over them, and that since the dawn of our country, we've kind of went the marshmallow way. And I think there's some people that see it as an issue beyond, skin concentration of a random chemical, and see it as like, you have a lot of experience that I don't have. I could either expand my knowledge base and become a more well-rounded person by including that in my encyclopedia, Simon, or I could just keep this one volume of that encyclopedia. A long time ago, for those of you who are listening, we used to have these things that people sold that were like where we got knowledge from. They were called encyclopedia.
And you had to get new ones every couple of years
because shit was changing, it's like,
and you had to get a loan to get them.
Right, they were really expensive. I grew up reading one from 1965 because that's all we had, and I don't know how we got that. But, the question is, how do we want? I mean, bottom line, this sun is going to nova at some point. It's going to obliterate even molecular data that we even existed. The Earth will be completely swallowed up when the sun novas, which is inevitable. So what the fuck are we talking about? Because the only choice we have, we can become completely nihilistic, which is, I think, where we've become in the United States, which is do whatever makes me successful and happy and pretty fuck much all the rest. Or we can create an amazing experience for ourselves individually. We can create an amazing experience for people around us. Which way do we want to go? It's not going to matter.
Oh, maybe it's because this is an atheist channel, and that's mainly where our focus lies. But I've said it often enough, and that goes well here too. We've got one planet, we've got one shot at life. We should make the best of it, make the most friends that we possibly can. Because
there's no reason.
Yes,
just because we can, and
it's your one shot. Make the most of it.
Even if you are religious and you don't buy into my existential, ending, which is totally going to happen, there's a reason why it was Lou Reed who wrote Southern Man, right? There's a reason why he wrote that song. All of the things we're talking about, all of the hatred, all of the discrimination, all of the classist kind of things, are totally antithetical to their 2,000-year-old Bronze Age book. In that book, and yes, readers, I did read it several times.
We all did.
Which is why I don't believe it, because you can't read it and believe it. Sorry. Is as you treat the least of my brethren, so have you treated me.
Yeah.
I don't think that needs any interpretation. I think that's pretty clear. It's like, okay, then how can you, Mitch McConnell, as you pointed out earlier, how can you take these perspectives? How can you put someone beneath you when the person you're trying to emulate did the opposite of that?
Yep. So I actually wonder, and this may have to be another show, could you split the two sides? I can think of 15 Christians off the top of my head right now who think they'll have a second shot at making things right after they die. You know what I mean? I can call you a nigger today. Yeah, don't hold your breath. But I can call you a nigger or a wetback today. I can call you a cunt or a whore. Just pick your derogatory term. I can say that today. But after I die, as long as you accept Jesus, we're still going to be friends in another life. Whereas if you're like the three of us, this is all we got. So fucking, I'm going to see Sifu for what I see him as, my brother. I'm going to see Peter what I see him as, my brother. It's just, if all you have is this one shot, I wonder how much of that ties into it. Because
a lot, I think.
One of the most Christian groups out there is the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
That is a religious-based organization. They light the cross to illuminate Jesus's path back to earth. Look that shit up, folks. So I wonder maybe on another show we can totally bash the shit out of Christians and say how much of that is split down the middle. If you think this is all you got, I'm going to shake your hand versus I'm going to call you a nigger now, but love you when we get to heaven later.
I got you later.
Yeah. I got lunch while we're in heaven.
It's a sad thing, Robert, but I think we need to do several more shows because we can't put this in just 2 or 3 shows.
Yeah. Well, you know, if nothing else, I hope, again, to talk to what I've said on our show before, Peter, what I've said on B's show, the 5,000 videos I've put out, the tweets. Y'all can hear me complain all you want. And I've always said no movement makes traction until its antithesis joins in. Did I say that right? Holy shit. Man, my crazy people was like taking it like a motherfucker.
I'm getting antithesis tattooed right here now.
Like I said, Susie Q can complain about the wage gap all she wants. But until Joe Blow says, hey, that shit isn't right, Susie's not going anywhere. You can get 1 million black people to say I'm being treated like shit. We've been ignored since 1619. When 25 white people, when my brother Sifu says, hey, you need to listen up, that's when impact is made. So, I mean, this talk was important for no other reason that here's an American, hold on, the screen's always fucking backwards. Here's an American white dude.
You were pointing in the right direction.
Did I fuck it up? How about this? I'm going to cover both ends. Fuck me. Yeah, sorry. There it is.
It's also the way you see it is not how it appears on screen. So you'll have to look to the.
How about this? The guy with the name Symon Stanley on the bottom of his fucking corner.
Now you're pointing.
There we go.
Now you're pointing right.
When an American white dude who's been my brother for a quarter of a century just said the exact same thing, that's when impact is made. When I'm no longer just some complaining Negro. Well, you had an experience that no one else had, Robert. You went and played college football. You signed an NFL contract. You have a house. What do you have to complain about? Apparently, I have to complain because Papa isn't getting enough attention. So here he is saying the exact same thing.
Well, I think that
someone else who doesn't look like me says the exact same shit. That's when, to me, impact is being made, right, Papa?
I mean, I would say several. We have so many. It's a depressing onion that you just keep peeling.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, so we get interpersonal relations sorted out, and we stop calling each other ridiculous words for no reason. And right. Okay, well, let's look at the criminal justice system and for-profit prisons and how every single drug that's been made illegal in the United States, the argument to make it illegal was inherently racist.
Nancy Reagan.
And I would say also that we never really got rid of slavery in this country because if you look at the model that is you are being essentially forced to work for somebody without pay, we're not too far off. They just made it a little bit more comfortable. Like we are all, to some degree, slaves to whatever bank we owe money to in order to get a house, in order to get an education, in order to get a car to get to your job, and all this stuff. We're paying a huge chunk of our income to some big, metaphorical plantation of banks, and then there's a lot of economic disparity. Why hasn't the minimum wage issue been addressed? How come we can't get there? Well, because we really like this group of people to be stuck in the shit because it makes it easier for me to make money. That's really if you would just be fucking honest about it, I go,
and not enough people will ever be I don't think you and I will be alive to see the day
I Christ hope not.
where the majority of
reason
people say shit is fucked up. Because again, there are names that I just can't say while we're alive that if you ask them, what do you have to complain about? Everything is hunky-dory. And not just for blacks, for women. I know women personally who tell me they are not feminist. And I don't understand that logic, to be honest with you. Not unless we just have a totally different definition of feminism. But there's not enough people to admit that the shit's just slightly unequal.
Well, I see things a lot in the context of physics, and what we're talking about is what, almost 500 years now of momentum.
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't been stopped. It's hit a bump, but as you know, the great late Martin Luther King said, giving us back voting rights did not cost them a penny. You know, allowing us to sit at the same counter did not cost them a penny. Allowing us to go to the same schools did not cost them anything. Yep. So it really didn't change much, you know, as far as the reasons why we have these problems. You know, so as this momentum has built over 400 or 500 years, it's going to take an enormous force to get that to stop. And then an enormous force to make it change direction, you know, and that can be used on a macro level on this scale. That can be used and observed in a micro level on a personal scale. Like when you stop going to the gym for a long time, the force to get you back in there continues to increase because of inertia. Oh, yeah. And, you know, if it's going to take a force, and, you know, being an older cunt myself, I don't, in a bye-bye birdie way, again, I don't see a lot of wonderfulness in the younger generations, but I do see a much more inclusive mentality on the whole in younger people than I've seen in any other generation, being Generation X that did absolutely nothing, as Judd Apatow said. You know, and so I do have hope because it is a numbers game. Yeah. It's a numbers game, and it's because it is a physics problem. You know, we have to stop this momentum and then create and have enough energy left over to push it in a different direction so it doesn't just start rolling in the same direction again. And there's a lot of force that's going against us in that way. And yeah, you and I are going to be flattened. There's no there's no hope for us in our lifetimes. But I said that about legal weed, you know, so you know,
I said that about
wonders never cease.
I said that.
I said that too. Like, no fucking way. Yeah.
I mean, are things better? Yeah,
they're different-ish.
To me, it's the equivalent of, well, Ike Turner didn't beat Tina with a closed fist. Today, he only slapped her. Mm-hmm. If you are someone who brings down violence upon your domestic partner, the open hand sounds better.
Doesn't feel better.
Exactly. And I've always said, and I think we both said the same thing. If you want to know if the bullying has stopped, don't ask the bully, ask the victim. Mm-hmm. Right? And we can sit here and say all day long, well, I don't hit you with the closed fist anymore. It's only an open hand. To you, it sounds better. It's like when people sit here and say that bullshit ass line about, well, you can't judge the 1800s by today's moral standards. It's like, the fuck you can't. It was like, well, all the slave owners knew was slavery. Well, let me ask you a fucking question. The slaves in 1800, do you think they felt good about what they were going through? Let me answer for them, even though I've never met them. The answer is fucking no. Right. In 1800, no one liked being beaten, raped, or owned. Nobody.
Or now, ever.
Because
unless you're with R. Kelly. That's
exactly. Right. And it's like, you know, fuck your logic game. it sucked for the victim. It's always sucked for the victim. And so as we fast forward to 2020, and again, all the names that I can say that you'll nod your head to, and they'll sit here and tell you things are better. I'm like, yeah, like you can't shoot my dad in the middle of a street anymore and not go. Actually, that's not true. How many cops? Actually, fuck everything. And this may have to be another show. No, my dad was shot in the middle of the fucking street in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in the late 60s. You know who went to jail for that? Fucking nobody. Fucking nobody. Nobody. Look at the shit that's happening today. How many black people are being executed? State-sponsored fucking executions and are getting out of jail. Derek fuckface Chauvin, who choked George Floyd, he's eating dinner in his living room tonight.
Right, he got out on bail. I read that.
Yeah, right? The people who shot Philando Castile, they're getting out. They never went to fucking jail.
Here's a question.
So we can do this one all fucking day long. What's that?
That the guy who murdered George Floyd got out on bail. You remember what the bail amount was?
$1 million.
I don't think that cop had that $1 million.
No.
I guarantee you some conservative group or some conservative person put up that $1 million so that he could get out. There's no way that motherfucker has that coin.
That's exactly what they did for fuckface Kyle. Whatever that fucker's last name was.
Yeah, they're how are you supporting this?
Yeah. The people who put up the money for fuckface Kyle, that was all evangelical conservatives.
Of course it was.
Right? And I think if it's $1 million, I think you only have to put up 10% cash. Mm-hmm. I'm horrible at math. So what's that? Let's just say it's 100K. I promise you. Matter of fact, I will bet anyone in the chat a fucking paycheck right now. Fuckface Derek Chauvin, that 100K came from evangelicals. I will almost bet you anything. Because if they paid money for fuckface Kyle, they paid money for fuckface Derek Chauvin. They both. And if I say this on Twitter, I'll get suspended like when I called Candace Owens the name that rhymes with the moon. But I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts.
That happened.
Yeah, someone raised money. And Papa, you're really concerned. Okay, Papa's mad. So my boys are directly tied to my emotional state. They hear me yelling. So Papa needs to know I'm okay.
Well, we need to acknowledge this. God hates us all said in the side chat. Papa's a coral snake killer. He deserves attention.
Yeah, here's this is my little mass murderer. Yeah, he's fine. We went to the vet as soon as someone said that's a coral snake.
Ooh.
Yeah, Sifa, I don't know if, there was a coral snake in the backyard. We kind of saw it at the same time. I've got one good leg. He's got 4 great ones. This little fucker ran out, grabbed the snake. He shook so hard.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently that's the way dogs kill snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know if he was bit. That's why he was shaking so hard. So I posted a picture asking, does anyone know what this is? The first person said that's a coral snake. I put his ass in the car. Feather and Fur, if you still remember, is literally right behind my house, less than 200 meters away. I was like, fuck it. Thanks to COVID, the protocols are different, so I had to wait outside while I gave all the information. But yeah, my little murderer, he's fine, everybody. I don't have to worry about getting a snake exterminator. I've got one. Bubba would have licked it till it bit him to death. Papa is my little Jeffrey Dahmer. He's my little mass murderer.
The Snake Slayer.
Okay, Robert, we're coming up on I think we're already over an hour and a half.
Okay.
So I think we should wrap it up, and we'll we'll have to do another show. We'll have to do several because
Let's do another one.
I wanna say a thank you to Kelvin though, who did try everything to be on the
Yeah.
show. He actually
Yeah.
moved to get somewhere where he had better internet, and it didn't work. I told him on Twitter we're going to have him back on another show. I mean,
I
this,
hope so.
yeah, because we need to have him on the show. Period.
Yeah,
And
who just wants to listen to us two old bastards talk for an hour? Jesus.
Like I said, everybody, this has been my brother for the last quarter fucking century. If I think it, he says it, and vice versa. If you ever want to know his opinion, ask me. So,
With that one exception. With one exception.
which one?
You don't like Tarantino movies, and I think they're awesome.
That is probably our one exception. That and Brussels sprouts. Other than that, we agree on fucking everything.
wait a
And
minute.
like I said, if you want to know why I'm an atheist and a weed smoker, blame this asshole.
How about
That's-
how about
that's my
pineapple?
highest
How about
achievement.
pineapple on pizza?
Oh,
no.
that's an abomination.
I'm about to say that's a crime. That's a war crime. Fuck what Bush did. An actual war crime is putting fruit on pizza. You
I'd
should.
rather talk about racism.
I agree. Life. How about that?
Yeah.
I love her. I would let that bitch move back into this house before I ordered one pineapple on a pizza and ate that shit. I'd give her the house key. I would.
You'd welcome her just,
You might be aggravating some certain Canadian right now, Robert.
We had that talk about the pineapple in the pizza.
Okay.
in
That's
Canada.
2-for-1 specials.
Yeah. Wait a minute. For you, the important talk is the one about pineapple on pizza. That's the important talk.
That's almost unforgivable.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try lots of stuff, like
That's
lots.
up there with putting the toilet roll on backwards. Fuck off.
Oh,
Just get out.
that's.
We're not.
Yeah,
It's
you
not
want to
going
talk
to
about
work.
what a real patriot is? A real patriot is someone who doesn't put fruit on pizza and puts toilet paper under, not over. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this. Yeah, matter of fact, that should be on a citizenship exam. Name a vice president. What's in the Bill of Rights? How do you put your toilet paper on? That's really all. That's all that's to it. Period.
Okay. So
Well,
let's wrap
It's
it
been a
up.
pleasure.
Simon,
Yep.
yeah, Simon.
I
Was
appreciate
great.
you guys having me and listening to my flavor of bullshit.
No problem. If you want to come back anytime.
I'll
hope
go
so.
wherever he goes.
That's my man.
Okay. Someone
Maybe
else.
the next one we can broadcast from Breckenridge.
Someone else wants attention now. Apparently.
Yeah, I'm.
Get it.
Somebody
get-
else wants.
Dogs.
Yeah. Next to me. You probably
Oh,
won't be
your
able to
dog.
see it. It's too small.
Yeah, I know.
Barely
can't see
see.
Well, yeah, Simon was great having you, and anytime you want to come back, just
Thank you.
let Robert know, and we'll set it up. I wanna also thank people in the chat who were here for the whole time. I'm sorry I couldn't put up the messages on screen. Something got screwed up. I think I have it fixed now, but I need to restart OBS and so I can make that happen. So we'll have that back next time. Robert, as always, great doing a show with you. I spammed the
Love
links to the T-shirt and the mug, so we're going to be doing that for the next couple of days, I think, to make people aware. We'll also have a page both on Mel's website and on our own website where people can go and pick out their favorite stuff. So,
Love it.
okay. Yeah.
Great to meet you.
If all goes well, we'll have another topical show next week where I just get to sit in the back room. We're shooting for Wednesday, so we'll see what happens. So keep an eye out on the Twitter account, and like and subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll never miss a show. Guys, thanks for dropping by. And
Thank you.
See you all next time. Bye-bye.
Peace, everybody.
Bye.